And so it was being argued at the time by many cultural theorists that these products and processes of popular culture were anarchic, and they were seen as being chaotic in terms of their tendency towards what was assumed to be disruption in relation to the normative order. Conversely, Adorno and Horkheimer, in Dialectic of Enlightenment, in the chapter entitled The Cultural Industry, they argue that these products and processes are actually not anarchic or chaotic, but rather have a uniformity to them. There's a level of standardization that encourages conformity to the hegemonic ideology of the capitalist system, and its values, its cultural values, etc., its practices, etc., and that therein resides an indication of how the culture industry actually enables the stability and continuity of the capitalist mode of production in capitalist society. Now, connected to that characteristic is a further feature of the culture industry that Adorno and Horkheimer identify. And this further feature relates to the notion of the logic of accumulation as pervading these products and processes of mass popular culture. Now, herein they identify the particular technology that is evident in the manufacturing, distribution, circulation, and even consumption of these products and processes. Now, they argue that technology in and of itself is not capitalist, but rather what we see is that within the capitalist system, a form of technology that is about maximizing efficiency in terms of the particular type of mode of exploitative relation of capital and labour that is evident in the capitalist system. A type of technology that in its rational logic is maximizing the effectiveness of the type and level of exploitation that we see in capitalism. So it's not technology per se that is the problem, it's a form of technology in its rational logic, in its mode of quantifying effectively a maximum level of exploitation of what we describe as surplus value, for example, from labour in respect to capital. This form of technology, as it pervades within the manufacturing distribution of these products and processes, is particularly suited and aligned with the capitalist logic of accumulation, and this therein provides evidence of how the logic of accumulation actually pervades the capitalist system and its culture industry. Furthermore, the Adorno and Horkheimer identify in respect to this logic of accumulation that pervades these products and processes, and this is actually quite straightforward idea here. So listen to this carefully. So furthermore, they identify how these products have a similar structure and a similar sort of mode of operation that each and every one of them similarly fits into and works with the existing capitalist mode of production, not in a disruptive way, but in a way that actually enables its seamless, effective operation. So these products are all very much, in terms of their structure and in terms of their very much in terms of their logic and their processes, are all very much similarly designed to actually fit into these capitalist productive processes. Here, let's think, for example, in terms of advertising. I do have quite a lot of interest in visual culture and advertising. So think about advertising in its sort of traditional sense, the promotion of commodities, although we can apply it in other ways. Okay, and so think about, for example, your social media feed. Think about, for example, and obviously other social media feeds are available, Facebook, for example, and think about your viewing, scrolling through Facebook, okay, and scrolling through your news feed, and think about the advertisements that appear. Obviously, it is the regulatory requirement of all social media to actually be able to, when an advert is evident, to state that it is an advert. However, think about the way in which these adverts that would be highlighted as promotional content, and where influencers also are required to actually make evident their advertising intention. But there is a level whereby these advertisements are almost indistinguishable from the rest of the content, from the content that you might be networked into, your friends, family, etc., people that you follow on Facebook, etc. And so herein, for my purposes here, provides an example of how these cultural industry products are designed in a way to actually seamlessly fit into the capitalist system of production. The advert seamlessly fits into the social media feed, which is another obviously cultural production in relation to the capitalist system. Okay, so those were the two that I wanted to actually be able to draw your attention to. First one, that the very much we see the products and processes of mass popular culture as being about a conformity rather than chaotic anarchy. And secondly, the idea that the logic of capital accumulation pervades these products and processes. A third feature that I'd like to draw your attention to is that market relations very much define these products and processes of mass popular culture. Now, by market relations is the idea of a dynamic that is set up, which is very pervasive in relation to our experience of these products and processes, whereby we are consumers and there are expectations that we are provided by a service provider, a producer, and in that sense we are in a relation of exchange between the service provider and us as consumer, and we are seen as in a competitive relation in respect to the provider and ourselves, whereby we would to actually seek those providers that are most sort of commercially viable for us. And that is also evident in relation to the model's relation between the provider and ourselves. So there's a market relation, a competitive market relation that is evident. And with all market relations, there are winners and losers. And so we see this market relation that is very much the focus of how we relate to these products in terms of a price-based, often price-based exchange relationship. Okay, so markets and market relations govern very much these products and processes in which the consumer is seen as sovereign, but obviously subject to the capitalist exploitation in terms of seeking profitability. And that's particularly evident in respect to a further feature of this market relation, and that is the identification of consumer segments that are seen as being particularly commercially viable. And that is a process that we define as market segmentation. And this process of market segmentation is something that is actually also detailed in the Adorno and Horkheimer's culture industry in the dialectic of enlightenment. And here they are really quite insightful into a practice that has become so technologically effective, and really sort of incredibly individualizing and incredibly able to actually, sort of maximize the investment in particular and what are seen as commercially viable market segments. But anyway, but right in the 1940s, they were evidently aware of the way in which the consumer markets actually divided it up into what are seen as being high yielding consumers in terms of the investment and input of the manufacturer, producer, etc. High yielding in terms of their profitability, and lesser yielding consumer market segments. And the notion is that in so doing, and this is what Adorno and Horkheimer actually identify, we start to see the development of a hierarchy of commercially viable consumers, and that can be very much differentiating, and that can be very much individuating, and obviously we can think about that philosophically as actually, dividing the working classes, and in so doing actually really sort of undermining the possibilities of a sort of like working class collective consciousness. So far, what have I looked at? I've looked at, firstly, the idea that these products and processes are very much defined in terms of conformity, that they are not anarchic or chaotic. Secondly, that a logic of capital accumulation actually pervades these products and processes. And thirdly, that market relations very much define these products and processes in competitive ways that are to the competitive advantage of the capitalists in relation to the producer, in relation to the consumer, even in relation to the manufacturing process. So, and fourthly, the argument goes in Adorno and Horkheimer's dialectic of enlightenment that these processes collectively work to undermine a sort of a critical engagement, or a tendency towards a critical engagement in relation to the working classes. Now, it does that not in a Pavlovian sense in which we are suddenly just not thinking. No, that's not what they argue. It's more sophisticated than that. So as to be able to exemplify that, think of your the way in which you listen to streaming technology in terms of your music. And we'll be looking more specifically at music next week. Okay, so think about your listening experience, for example, Spotify, although other sort of streaming services are available. And think about the times when there have been preferences put forward that said, oh, you might like to listen to this other song, etc., etc. Okay, now that whole process is a very much an algorithmic, data-driven process in which it looks as if, oh, they know my music, oh, they know what I like, and it looks as if they actually are very much gearing this towards a personal sort of service for you as consumer. But no, that's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is that this is an incredible mathematical calculation, algorithmic calculation, that has discerned you as a particular consumer market segment, looked at your previous listening options, and increasingly been able to network that information in relation to quite big databases that can track other aspects of your social media, in the internet, what we call footsteps. And with all that information, be able to actually direct these preferences to you. So my issue here that I'm putting forward is that in so doing, we are encouraged just to scroll, sort of almost apathetically, just scroll through, or even just go with whatever it is that's been preferred for us. And in so doing, we are not at that time when we're actually, oh yeah, okay, I'll click on, I'll stroll on, I'll scroll on, I'll scroll on and scroll on and click on to what's being offered to me. And in so doing, at that moment, we are not being critical, we are not being critically engaged. And it's that tendency towards a programmatic relation to the social world that is enabled through increasingly sophisticated sort of technology, the application of a particular type of technological logic, devices, etc., that almost apathetic tendency for us to just go along with the algorithm has the effect of disinclining critical engagements, rather than listening to, I don't know, maybe it's a Simon Cowell song that they want us to listen to, or in terms of the algorithmic sort of preferences, or Stock Aitken and Waterman, or other sort of obvious music pop genre. Rather than actually go along with that, what is disencouraged by this algorithmic directed music listening is a critical engagement, is the independent of critical thought that might say, well, no, I'm going to listen to, I don't know, Bob Marley's Redemption Song, or I'm going to listen to Billy Bragg, or I'm going to listen to some new independent sort of like really sort of authentic music style that's really speaking to my generation, or really critically engaging with the sort of conditions of everyday life. And so the issue that I'm raising here is that, and this is obviously the issue that Adorno and Horkheimer are identifying, is that the way in which these products and processes are designed, and in terms of their logic of accumulation, in terms of their conformity, in terms of their market relations, etc., in terms of their technological innovation, all of which actually disincline a sort of a critical engagement necessary to actually a collective will for us to live in another way than that which is presented. Okay, so that was my main intention, was to actually just be able to introduce you to some sort of key conceptual and theoretical ideas in relation to the Frankfurt School. Now, the remainder of the session is text to audio, and I've also included some visual ethnographic material and some because I do a lot of sort of like urban critical theory, which has a very sort of visual focus to it. And so just all of which is just to try to really enliven your thoughts and your listening and watching experience, to and so as to, you know, provide you with the ability to actually, you know, look at your surrounding context to be able to apply these ideas. So enjoy the rest of the material. Thank you very much for listening, and keep critically thinking. Okay, bye-bye.